Okay, so once again, quick disclaimer that this call is being recorded and we place our recordings on our YouTube channel. Please be aware that this call is also joined by our Microsoft team members as well as from our customers and partners. And if you don't mind, please mute your phone if you're not speaking or asking questions. Okay, so let's jump in with our topic of discussion. Today, we're going to be talking about Azure DevOps deployment for Logic Apps. And, uh, if you can, somebody can let anybody who is joining, let them in. I will really appreciate it since I may not be looking at that screen. So quickly, here's a quick agenda. We are going to be talking about DevOps deployment for Azure Logic Apps. Um, and we will be talking about both the CI and CD pipeline, continuous integration, continuous deployment. And we will not only talk about Azure DevOps, we will also cover GitHub as well. Though the concept of the same, implementation is slightly different. So just keep in mind, we will be focusing on Azure Logic App Standard. That's most enterprise use. The idea is you have a Logic app, and these are some of the components of the Logic app. You have a hosting plan, you have a storage account where Logic app data is stored. It may be accessing it over MSI. You may have an API connection to a service. All of that stuff that is a part of that is the part of the Logic app. So these are the pieces that have to be deployed as when you are deploying the Logic app. Okay. Moving forward, this is some detail of what different things does. You have a workflow and you have a workflow design time, which kind of basically shows you how the workflow visually looks. Workflow file itself is just a JSON file. Okay. And in regards to, there are two parts to it. One is actually deploying the Logic app infrastructure, which is Logic app, storage account, app insight, integration accounts, and some other stuff. We are not going to be talking about it because that is just a general part of infrastructure as code pipeline. You can use Terraform, Bicep. There are many tools to do that. But we are going to be talking about, you have the infrastructure, you are making modifications to Logic app or deploying the Logic app for the first time to that infrastructure, how you do it. How a developer or citizen developer, whoever they are, how they will be deploying these services, the applications or Logic apps and workflows, updating them as you update them and you deploy it. And they're automatically deployed it into your environment and then move into the other environment. And just keep one thing in mind, that we will be focusing on once again, deployment of the Logic apps, um, not the infrastructure, number one, and we will be focusing on VS Code as our tool of focus. Okay. So here is our standard or sample application. We have a Logic app that we will be using HTTP trigger. You send some data, it takes that data, blob data, put it in a storage container blob, and then send the blob key back in the response. Very simple application. Since we are focusing on DevOps, that's why we will be focusing more not focusing less on how you implement the Logic app. So this is the Logic app implemented. And by the way, I want to show you what I have first, and then we go from there. So this is I have this repo in Azure that I have created, LA DevOps Demo 03. As you can see, there are no commits there. What we're going to do, we're going to make changes and commit it here. I already have kind of opened this repo, do a git clone. It's a git-based repo. I'm doing a git clone. I have added this workflow here. We are going to add a few more files here as well. So let's take a look. So first of all, as you can see, there are two folders. One is Logic Apps, and that's where we have the workflow deployed. And the second folder is the pipelines. That's where we're going to be creating our pipelines. Okay. And then we will use those pipelines in our Azure DevOps project. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's move on. Let's create our first pipeline, and its name is adoci.yaml. Okay, and I'm going to paste some code and let me explain it to you what it does. Okay, by the way, I'm not kind of uh, getting it out of thin air. There are detailed samples, documentation available from where this code is coming from. So I have linked to the samples which you can use to kind of which has this code as samples which you can use as a starting point for your DevOps process. So there are two things we are going to be doing. The first thing that we are going to be doing is the the building of the logic app or kind of a build process. And what is that? We will go to our logic apps folder. And as you can see here, we have a logic apps folder. We will get that particular directory. The next thing is, and by the way, is it the font is good enough? Should I increase the font size or is it okay? And silence is golden, so I think it's okay. And then what we're going to do, we're going to be making a zip file, okay? And then we will put the zip file as an artifact for this pipeline. Got it? First, you get to the right folder, create a zip file out of it, and push the zip file as the um, as the basically as an artifact for the pipeline. Okay, that's your CI pipeline, but we have to deploy it as well. So how do we do it? So in that case, let's create a other folder, a new file, cd.yaml. Okay, and for that, we are going to copy some code, and I will explain it to this code is a little bit has more into it. So I will explain it. Give me 1 second. Let me just copy it. Okay. So I pasted it here. Let's go back. So this is your trigger. As you know that there is no trigger as such defined. What we have is there is no pull request that we are using. We are creating looking at two environments, dev and prod. These are pipeline environment. And then what we are saying is that look at this pipeline, okay? And based on that, trigger on that pipeline, we are going to name it LA DevOps Demo 03.ci. Okay. Once that happens, then you trigger this process. So basically, once the build is complete, then you deploy it. So once the CI is complete, then you do CD. Okay. And in the stage dev, what we are doing is this is the VM image. We are using the kind of a built-in hosted pool. This is the VM image. And then we are just doing a deployment. And just keep in mind why it is saying function app. Just keep in mind that Azure Logic App standard behind the scene, it's a function app premium. Okay, that's what it's built on. So that's why you're using the same thing, you're just deploying it back, okay? And I already created, just wanna show it to you here. Sorry for jumping back and forth. I already have created this logic app here. The infrastructure, as I said, we have already created. So the logic app is already there. So I'm gonna be deploying it into that particular logic app. Okay, second, hold on. So let me go. Yes. So we are going to be deploying it. This one, this is the dev one. And the next thing is a little more interesting. What we are doing is we are doing validation. So once you deploy it in dev, You are basically, this is a manual validation. In that case, you are stopping your workflow or pausing a workflow. You will get an email saying, hey, it needs to be validated. So please validate it. Once you validate it, if it's approved, then you will move further and this line will be executed. And this is very similar. The only thing here is that you are going to a different logic app. So first deploy in dev, then you deploy in production. Any questions? Okay. So if there are no questions, so let's start pushing this code in. So what we're going to do is first we're going to say that this is update to and commit. And now what we're going to do is we are going to sync changes and it will ask for your pad token. So let's give it one time. Actually, before we do it, let's me open a new terminal and run that command here. So it doesn't ask us again and again. Okay. And now let's click here. Okay, so now it's pushing the changes into our DevOps repo. Okay, it's pushing our Logic app. And at this moment, there is no build pipeline, there is no deploy pipeline, no CI, no CD, it's just pushing it. Okay, let me just post it again. Sure why it's, sorry, question. So, okay, hold on 1 second. What's going on? I think I have the right one. Oh, sorry, I mistype it. Let me try again. Sorry, folks. Live demos are always interesting. Okay, so good. It's checked in. So let's go in here. This is our repo. Let's refresh it. You should see the code now. You see pipelines are there, logic apps are there. Okay, so we are doing something right. Now let's create the build pipeline. Okay, so what we are gonna do is we are gonna say new pipeline. And of course, we are using Azure repos Git, and this is our repo. And we are going to say use the existing pipeline file. And where is the existing pipeline? We put in an CI. So first we do CI, continuous integration. So this is the build pipeline. Everything is there. And what we are going to do is we are going to say run. Okay, so it's going to create the pipeline and run it. So let's click on it. Let's see what's going on here. So this is acquiring an agent, initializing job, checking out code, creating project, creating zip file, and pushing the zip artifacts, and it is done. Very quick because nothing much to it. I mean, what we're gonna do is go back to the pipelines and let's change this pipeline's name to dash CI because that's the name we are using to trigger our build workflow. Okay, so now let's go back and create a new pipeline. Okay, and this pipeline, same thing. It here we existing YAML file main, and we go in and we see CD. Okay, so now we are doing CD. And same thing, it's going to be triggered by this one. All good. This pipeline is there. And let's make sure everything is there. I mean, we are doing it. Yes, it's going to get that zip deploy and then deploy it. So let's run it. So it's now going to create and run the pipeline. In the meantime, let me open my email. Okay. So I'm going to go to, this is my test account and I have a test email. So let's go into the Outlook. And before, okay, and as you can see, I'm getting notification if it's successful or not. But in any case, let's come here. It's doing the dev deployment. So let's see where it is. It has downloaded the artifact. Now it is using package zip deploy. Using deploy is initiated. It's doing that. Just one thing to keep in mind. I have there is a service connection that is needed, and I have already created it. I will show it to you once the deployment is complete. So now it is deploying into the dev. Okay. So while it is deploying it, let's look at let's the deployment get coming. In the meantime, any questions, folks? And if somebody has posted a question in the chat window, sorry, I was focusing here. Okay, so this is being deployed. Service package mount. Yes. So let's wait for a second and then we will see our logic app there. So go ahead, a question. Okay, I know it's kind of watching paint dry, but yeah. So, okay, while this is deploying, let me show you in the project settings. I have a service connection. Service connection gives this the ability to this project to deploy to a certain um, Azure service or Azure subscription. So here's what I'm doing. I am using ARM resource service connection, and I'm using the default one, workload identity. I go in here, I will select the subscription and give it a second, let it come up. And then what will happen is, yeah, this is a subscription, and this is, sorry, Azure internal for projects. And then you will pick the resource groups, whatever resource group, and it will create a service principal on the other side. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It will create a service principal, and that service principal will be created in your subscription. That's how it's able to access your subscription. Okay, it will have a contributor level access. So just keep that in mind. And you will need that if you want to deploy it. Okay. So let's go into the pipelines again and let's see what's going on. Okay, so dev deployment is complete. It has sent us a validation message. Let's see. Okay, look, we got an email saying, hey, review it. You need to validate. But before we validate, let's see what's happening on the dev side. Okay, we go into the dev and let's see if the workflow is created. Give it a second. Yeah, so there is a workflow. There was no workflow before. Now there is a workflow here. Let's test it out if the workflow is working. So this is the workflow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the URL of the workflow, and this is my test. I'm using very simple. This is uh, advanced REST client. You can use Postman or whatever you want. Um, I'm using that. And basically, this is my body that I'm sending test 1 to 3, test data APL. That's data being sent. And so let's call it. Let's see. Okay, so you see, successfully it returned that, and it is returned. I mean, what we are doing is we're appending some text at the end through the Logic app, and that's what it's returning. So basically, it's working fine. We are good here. So we are ready to approve this workflow so it can be moved to the next stage. Okay, so I'm going to go in. I'm going to say review manual validation. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to review it, and I'm gonna say all good. Okay, and I can reject it or I can resume it. Once I resume it, now it's gonna move to the next part of the pipeline, and now it is deploying to prod. Got it? So this is kind of this is the kind of all power of DevOps that you are doing. And if we look at the pipeline, and I'm gonna switch to CD pipeline, and look, in this validation, we are saying that this job will expire in 1 day. So what will happen is, let's say somebody accidentally did some upload. Yes, it was deployed in dev, but nobody was there to approve or check it for production. It will expire. It will never go into production. Got it? So the default is um, the default is uh, rejection. So it will reject it if there is no approval. Got it? So let's go back here. Let's see if it's being deployed. So right now it's being deployed in production. Okay. Any questions? Okay. So while it is deploying, I mean, since we have only 30 minutes, I want to spend some time on the um on the GitHub side as well. I have a Sure. Hey guys, if you are if you're not asking a question, please mute yourself. Thank you. So that's that. So let's take a look at the GitHub side of things. Is Azure DevOps, as I said, we have to do a CI pipeline and a CD pipeline. Once you do that, CI CD, CI for build, CD for your actual deployment. In the CD, we have deployed in production, sorry, dev, and then we validated it, and then we deployed in production. So let's see if the production is okay. So let's go in here. Um, this is dev, and let's go into and this is prod, and we just want to see if it's there in the prod as well. These are the workflows. So now you see a workflow in the prod as well. Okay, it is deployed. And since we have only 6 minutes, I want to spend some time on the GitHub side. So let me show you. This is my GitHub repo. I have a very similar setup on that side as well. Let me show it to you. Okay. Once again, I have a workflow that is deployed in this GitHub repo, um, you know, and what I have done is I have created a action for that GitHub. Okay. And let me increase the little bit. Okay. So this is my I don't want to go with the Logic App code. I mean, you're already familiar with it. This is the GitHub pipeline. Once again, the GitHub pipeline is coming from the same sample, same documentation that I have in the resources as well. So please take a look at it. There's a very detailed, in-depth samples they have. Same thing here. Okay. What we are doing is it will trigger, first of all, the first job is to building the Logic app, and it is using GitHub Runner, the default built-in runner. It's gonna build it, then it's gonna deploy it. So what it will do is it will deploy the Logic app in uh, in a particular environment, and all of these action, as you can see here, they are function action. So basically, this is getting the publish profile, publishing the Logic apps. So once again, Azure function all these actions. Okay. And then it will be deploying. It's a kind of a, in this one, there's no difference between kind kind of a CI and CD in a sense like you have in the same action. You can do different action as well if you want, and you can type. That's okay. But I am doing it in one action, and they are basically jobs. First job is building. Then you have the second is uh, step is deploy, and in that you're doing different things. You're checking out the code, the artifact that you put in. Okay, one thing here to keep in mind: you have to use the same version of download artifact that you use for upload. And this thing really kind of made me scratch my head or pull my hair out because I was using different version and it was failing here. It was saying, hey, I cannot download, there's no artifact. For some reason, you have to use this is V4, this has to be V4. So make sure save yourself time, use V4 on both ends. Okay. Once you do that, then the last thing is getting the published profile and then deploying it to the Logic app. That's all you have to do. Okay. So this is basically end-to-end flow for the Logic for the GitHub based DevOps. So just a quick recap, what we saw, and let's do a quick test on that as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the response. I'm going to go in concatenate. I'm going to use for. I'm going to update that workflow, save it, and then say updates. I'm going to commit it. And at this moment, and let's sync changes. And this will start deploying this action. Okay. And you will see that action working. So what we saw um, how you can use Azure DevOps and Git pipelines, Azure DevOps pipelines and Git actions to deploy Logic apps or update your existing Logic apps code. So as you are adding more and more stuff to your Logic app, you can make those changes, and those changes will be automatically pushed based through your DevOps pipeline. And in the Azure DevOps pipeline, you can have a validation step, and you can basically, check the code, see if everything is working in dev test, and then promote it to production. So if we go back in here, let's see if the pipeline is running or actions are running. So you see, this is the one, and this is currently deploying. You see, deploying to dev. As you can see, each step is going through and it is deploying there. Any questions so far? I know we have one more minute. Okay, and in the resources, I have this link. This is the Azure Logic Apps DevOps samples in GitHub. This is all my samples are based out of. So please take a look. And you see this thing is still deploying. And so I know we are right on time, but just want to share that with you. Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much, and hope to see everybody next week for another session of Azure Power Lunch. And I will upload the video and the slide deck.